And a good Thursday morning, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Birds 365. I don't know what day of the year it is, John McMullen, but we are 1 week away from the NFL draft.
1 week away.
So 7 is the number today. Not 365, it's 7 is the day. And the draft is 1 week from today. We're going to touch on that, but holy mackerel, Jalen Hurts arose yesterday. He came from the ashes and spoke, and I have a bite that he said that sits in my head to start this day off. I imagine you were there and probably took it in a lot better. I was on the radio while he was kind of talking yesterday, so I didn't get to watch it in real time, but do you have any initial thoughts on what we saw from one Jalen Hurts yesterday?
Yeah, before I get into Jalen, first of all, I have to say happy Nick Batum Day for everybody. I want to get that out. So it is a week away from the draft, but Nick Batum Day.
Did you hear that? By the way, real quick, you and I used to fight about the process for years. But apparently Maury asked Hinkie to ring the bell and he declined.
I did not hear that. It doesn't surprise me. Sam's a weirdo. Let's be honest. I mean, anybody who writes whether you want to call it a manifesto or a dissertation, if you want to go negative or positive, anybody who does that after they get fired is a lunatic. And I said from that day, never get another job because nobody else wants that.
No,
because executives, coaches, and pro sports, bottom line is you're normally hired to be fired. The great Bum Phillips.
Unless you're Howie Roseman.
Well, even Howie, got he gets his up. Howie already lost his job once.
That's true.
And he mentions, look, he's got more. I talk about it on the show all the time. Like he's got more security than any other GM in this league. He doesn't like when that's brought up. Ruben brought that up at his pre-draft press conference, and he balked. And Ruben said, look, we all know Jeffrey respects you, and he said it in a more positive way, and you have a lot of rope and blah, blah, blah. And then how we answered the question. So he does have more rope, but guess what? He doesn't have a lifetime contract. Jeffrey Lurie's over 70 years old. We don't know that relationship between Howie and Julian Lurie. Maybe he's got a right-hand man in mind. So
yeah, that would be the only way I could see something coming to an end for Howie is when Jeffrey leaves. If his son comes in and essentially says, look, I got my own guy.
Exactly.
You're my dad's guy. That's it. But other than that, I don't think.
No, I don't think Jeffrey's moving on.
No, the Eagles had 3 consecutive seasons, which they've never had in the Lurie era, of under 9 wins, like 3 consecutive 6-win years, maybe.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, if things go negative, anything's on the table. I thought it'd be ludicrous to talk about getting rid of Doug Peterson so soon after the Super Bowl. I remember we were out in Minneapolis. I remember at the bar after the Eagles won the Super Bowl, or maybe it was the day before, the day after, but I was like, Doug Peterson, lifetime dispensation. I said, never have to buy a drink in Philadelphia, all that stuff. He's out the door that quick. So if things go negative for an extended period of time, I mean, you never say never. But all I say about Howie is he's got more job security than any other GM in the NFL.
Yeah.
And that's the most important part of it. And because of that, he can do things that other GMs can't do. And that's fair to point out. It's fair to say.
It's part of the stability.
And it's a big advantage.
Right. It's the part of the stability and, elongated success is that you have one idea that does change throughout, but they stay to what they believe in. And you don't have somebody else coming in and constantly changing the philosophy. It's, hey, this is what we do. Sometimes we're going to hit, sometimes we're going to miss. But if we stick to what we do, we're going to have stability and long-term success. And that seems to be what has happened here.
Yeah, and that gives you better avenues to success, and more people should copy that and use that type of mindset. Now you got to find the right guy as well. You don't want to sit around for continuity's sake, but and that's the case with Brian Johnson. So sorry I took you on a tangent there, but with Jalen Hurts, you can make a strong argument that, all right, this is a guy he's familiar with. This is a guy that forget about meeting. I think that's overblown because, Brian meeting him at 4 years old or whatever, what is he tapping him on the head and saying, "Hey, nice job, kid." There's not a meaningful relationship being developed there, but they've known each other for a long time, and he recruited him twice in college. But as I often said, even there, you didn't get him, Mike. You didn't get him when he recruited him. So I think a lot of that was overblown to begin with about that relationship. Now, when they got here together, there was tremendous success, and he was the quarterback's coach when Shane was the offensive coordinator, and he turned into the runner-up for the MVP, and I still think he was the best player on the field in Super Bowl 52. He had a tremendous year. And then Shane leaves, and that's what happens when you have success and Brian gets elevated. And, would I have given him another year? Yeah. I mean, they were 8th in offense. They were top, one of the best third down offenses, one of the best fourth down offenses. So you're having success.
Yeah, I don't know what that says about the
relationally.
league. I don't know what that says about the league in a vacuum, that all offenses, because I would ask this question, and again, I'm not here to say they were awful. I just don't think they came close to expectations. And there was no game, even though the numbers said they weren't awful. Watching them every week, you were just like, what is this? There's not one game that I can just vividly say, man, the offense just clicked in this week. They just looked like they were supposed to. I don't remember one week, maybe the Buffalo game where they put up, they had a good game. I mean, even games like Washington where they ended up getting to 30-plus points, you were like, man, this is still like they just didn't have clean offensive games. So the numbers at the end look good, but I think we could all agree that their offense should have looked and produced more, right?
No, yeah, I think that's fair. And expectations, that's the problem because the expectations were so high. But I mean, there's so much of it we don't
So
know.
high, though, because of the personnel they have, right? I mean, you got A.J. Brown,
Yeah.
Devontae Smith, Dallas
And
Goedert, the
there's
offensive
nothing.
line, the quarterback who had was the best player in the field in the Super Bowl. You went out and got Swift. I mean, there was reason. A lot of times, John, the Eagle fans can be irrational, and I will call them out when they're irrational. But I will also say when they're not being irrational. To think that offense should have been better, I don't think was an irrational thought.
No, I don't think it was irrational. But then you start, all right, peeling the onion back and saying why. I go all the way back to the preseason when Nick did an interview on Jeff McClain's podcast, and he basically said, and by the way, he said this to me behind the scenes as well. It's not necessarily about doing different things. It's about getting better at what you do. In other words, he came in with that mindset of, hey, we're pretty damn good. We just got to sharpen up what we do and get even better at what we do. And all of a sudden, the rest of the league is looking at the Eagles and saying, how are we going to stop this and making adjustments? And the Eagles are rolling out the footballs and doing exactly what they did the year prior.
Yeah.
And they're trying to make big plays, and everybody from defensively, they're trying to limit those big plays and saying, all right, sort of like Kansas City, if you're going to beat us, you're going to beat us with those small cuts down the field, nothing over the top. And the Eagles seem to fall in love with the big play and trying to push things down the field all the time. And that could be Nick Sirianni. I think it was most notably. That could be Brian. Certainly part of it, but he didn't have the power to do anything about it if he wanted to change it. And then it could be a lot with Jalen Hurts, to be honest, as well. So there's three parts to that equation.
Well, because when I had Britton Covey on at the Super Bowl, he said they were 10-1 and they were winning close games, but teams were getting better and they weren't. So as the season went on, more tape, more film. I see what you're doing, and if you're not going to change it, we're going to figure you out. And we figured you out because you didn't change it. So it's a pretty accurate assessment of why he feels the offense towards the end of the year was horrid, because they were just okay winning games, finding ways. And we're like, good teams find ways to win. Okay, because you're so talented. So the talent took them to 10 wins. The lack of evolution from the coaching staff, seemingly going back to when I hosted on Wednesday with you, John, and what Brandon Graham said, we had the wrong coaches in the wrong places. They didn't evolve this offense the last 7 weeks of the season, and you saw teams adjust to them.
Well, I think that's part of it, but I do think, that's convenient, I will say, because, look, I say it in good times, I say it in bad times. It's players first. Players are more important than coaches. When you're going to the Super Bowl, and the same case is true when you're having a bad season. It's more about the talent. It's more about the players playing up. Now, you can blame the coaches in smaller pockets, but as I'm divvying up that blame, if you want to go percentage-wise, between those three men, Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts, Brian Johnson, Brian would be the lowest in the blame game, and he's the one who paid for it. But that's the nature of the NFL. I mean, that's just it. That's just
Sure.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
When you don't reach expectations, somebody's got to pay for it.
Well, that's in every walk of life, right? The corporate leader looks at the line item, doesn't know the guy's name, and says, "Oh, there's $48,000 we can get off my ledger." Well, you don't even know what this guy does. Don't care. Get rid of him.
Yeah, exactly. So, is that going to make you better? Maybe, maybe not. But I think a lot of it, and Nick Sirianni read the room and understood he had to make a change to satisfy Jeffrey Lurie. And then we'll see if Jalen Hurts takes accountability. I go back to that Seattle game where he and AJ went off the reservation, so to speak, trying to win the game. They were moving that football, Mike. They would have went down the field if they would have stayed patient, probably won that game, or at least tied the game. Instead, they tried to go for it all in one play. It's a bad throw, underthrown into double coverage, interception, game over. That's.
But even in that game, they only scored 17 points.
No,
it wasn't like the offense was having a great night.
No, but they were in a position to win a game.
Sure, absolutely.
And that was.
But I think that also shows, John, how much talent the Eagles have on offense, that they were. Look, the whole weird part about, and looking back, still here we are in April, a week from the draft, and you're still like, I can't believe I watched this, is that they won 10 games, and those wins included wins against Kansas City, Buffalo, Dallas along the way. The games they lost, San Francisco, you got beat up. The second Dallas game, then you're losing to the Cardinals. I mean, come on. What are you talking about here?
Well, the Jets. I mean, the Jets beat.
But the Jets game's early in the year, and you're like, all right, you have a slip up every once in a while.
That's a bad loss, though. Even though that was that one loss in the first in the 10-1 start, you're losing to Zach Wilson. And that's Bryce Huff had a tremendous game for the people who want to watch the tape of Bryce Huff in that game. But getting back to AJ. My whole point of bringing that up wasn't about the particular play. It was, if you remember, after the game, AJ took accountability. Jalen never did. To this day, he never did. That to me has to change. He's got to accept his part of not reaching those expectations to get back to what he was in 2022. And I thought yesterday was a good first step to that, because I thought he was more pragmatic and he was more reflective than he typically was. Both when talking about Brian Johnson.
Yeah.
He said, I just didn't think it was the right time for him. And that's that sort
That
of,
was the comment that stood
yeah.
out the most to me, was another example of somebody saying we had the wrong guy. It just was not that he won't be a head coach down the road or something, but I just didn't think it was the right time for him. And when I talked to Britton Covey at the Super Bowl, he said similarly the same thing. I asked him, do you think you guys should have had a more veteran play caller? And he said, yeah, I do. I think we should have had somebody that was a little bit more experienced in running the offense. And then you go to Brandon Graham's comments the other day, which is we had the coaches in the wrong spots. I don't know if the players are trying to scapegoat the coaches, because you know me, John, I'm not a big blame the coach guy, but this team has way too much talent to not say that there had to be something going on.
I just think it's natural from a fan and even a player perspective. They want to protect the players at all costs. And they don't, that's the last guy they want to look at is the player. They want to blame other people, fans particularly. They want to blame other people because they want to believe they have everything in place and they want to believe everybody's great and this and that. And it's typically, to be honest, not the case. The point about Brian, and it's easy to point at Brian and Sean because they didn't reach expectations. Go back to 2021. You have a first-year head coach. You have a first-year defensive coordinator. Shane had a little bit of experience, but no play calling as an offensive coordinator. Basically, he was Sean Desai of offense. He had 1 year that wasn't very successful, and he wasn't calling plays 100% of the time. So they had very little experience at the three, and that was a big story at the time. Where's the experience? How is this going to work out? Where's Nick Sirianni going to get? And it turns out there's a lot of different ways he can get advice, and he's got Frank Reich on speed dial and all that kind of stuff, and veteran coaches, and he became friends with Vic Fangio very quickly, defensively from that perspective, and Vic was helping out in an unofficial capacity, which I always point out, back when things started out, particularly in 2022, obviously, when things really exploded. And we talked not yesterday, but when you were here last about Gannon and how many people had career seasons under Gannon in the Super Bowl year on defense. And Shane, which just had a tremendous feel for play calling after he got that gig midway through 2021. So they're young.
Yep.
It ain't about being young. It ain't about being inexperienced. You do have to expect some growing pains.
Yeah, you have to start somewhere. I guess the question is starting on a team that has Super Bowl aspirations where you start. Shane and John stepped into a situation that was coming off of a poor season, not a lot of expectations. The other two guys stepped into a situation with very little experience and said, hey, we were in the Super Bowl last year. Take us back and win it.
Well, yeah. And that's the pendulum effect we're dealing with. So, you can't do it, as you mentioned with Britton and BJ, you can't do it with young guys. Now they have Vic Fangio who's been coordinating, since World War II, and you have Kellen Moore, who's been a long time offensive coordinator, even though he's pretty young. And that's how you go back, and we'll see how it works out.
Hey, listen,
but it's not going to work out because of just experience.
I'm all about giving a guy with no experience an opportunity. I mean, heck, every single guy that I hired gets rated from me in another market. Everybody I put on the air, somebody takes them from me. So you give people an opportunity because you think they have talent. I'm all for that. I think the Eagles gave two guys an opportunity that they thought had talent. And for whatever reason, here we are a week from the draft figuring out what do they need to fix some of the problems. Well, we have the answers. The 22nd pick is signed, sealed, and delivered. And Ann Cummings from Pro Football Network has the answer, and he's going to give it to you. All you have to do is stick around right there. When he comes back, we will tell you exactly what the Eagles will do with pick 22 or the trade or a trade up or a trade back. You'll find out next here on Birds 365.